Welcome to my electroforming tutorial for this moon goddess pendant. You need to prep your material with either copper conductive paint or copper tape, which is also conductive and just less messier. I chose copper tape for this part because the surfaces are a lot smoother than others, and it was just something new that I wanted to try. You can use a burnisher like I have here, and basically it allows you to flatten all the creases and mistakes you've made without hurting the material or scratching the surface of your material. This particular step is really important for you to take your time. You want to use your burnisher to flatten down all the creases that you have on your tape and make sure that there are no air bubbles and that the tape is making a very perfect contact with your material, and in this case my stone. If any copper solution gets in between your material and the copper tape can start lifting, and when the electroforming session starts going, it will start depositing in a very weird way. Your piece is just not going to look right, and you're just going to be mad at yourself for not taking that extra 5 minutes to make sure you get it right. Materials that go into the copper solution, whether they're porous, organic, they will dissolve, whatever the case may be, need to be completely protective if they are not covered in conductive paint or in the copper tape that you see in my stone. So what I'm doing here is I am protecting it by adding a layer of liquid latex. So basically you just paint it on and you allow it to dry for a good couple hours, and then once it's ready, it will completely protect your material from the acidity in the copper solution. Another hot tip that I have for you is wherever there's liquid latex, the copper will not form. The next few steps is where everything starts to kind of sort of come alive. I am using a 12 gauge copper wire, and it is extremely hard, so you can use general tools if you don't have these at home. I do metal smithing, so I work a lot with metals, so I have a variety of tools at hand, but you can use shapes around your house to shape your material if you don't have them. But if you plan to do this on the regular, I do recommend you get the tools you need, because bending very hard wire can be really hard on your joints. As you can see, I have already affixed the moon piece to the pendant, and I've actually used some resin, but I will show you in a few minutes just how to do that. But before you fix any elements or specific accessories to your main piece, you want to make sure they are as perfect as possible, because once they're completely permanently fixed on, it's very hard for you to go back and redo anything. I like to see what I'm working with, so I like to visualize the final piece. So in this case, I'm putting the bail to see where it's going to go and then how I'm going to add the rest. Here I am working with 26 gauge wire, and I am just wrapping it around the bail before the bail gets set to the pendant. Once I was satisfied with it, I went ahead and used some pliers to make sure that the end piece was smooth to the surface. Now here's where the resin comes in. You want to make sure that when you add your resin, you are as precise as possible. I cannot emphasize this enough. Because you are working with a small range of space with your UV light, you want to make sure you have your piece set before you turn on the light. Once the light turns on, the UV resin sets, and there's no going back. Don't forget to turn your piece in all angles so that the UV light catches and then the whole piece is cured, not just some parts. Once you've checked that it's okay, you want to go back and reinforce the joints by adding just a little more of a dab of UV resin to finalize your piece. I briefly talked about copper conductive paint. Now, you can either make your own solution, or you can buy a ready-made compound. Basically, you use this to cover the remaining pieces so that when it's in the acid bath, they don't either get ruined and or they are successfully completely plated in copper. One thing to keep in mind is that when you use any type of glues to join pieces together, those will need to have copper conductive paint. You do not want to submerge your piece into the acid bath and expose any organic or foreign substances into the liquid, because it will change the pH value and it would just ruin it, and your next pieces that you put in there are just going to come out completely wrong. You may need to cover your piece in more than one layer and allow enough time to dry between layers. So for this section, I'm going to show you really quickly without having any projects in. You have two cables. The copper anode will be connected to the red, and then your piece will be connected to your black. Before you set up your machine, you want to make sure that these pieces are affixed to your setup, because that's how the current is going to flow. So red is fire. That's what I think of it. And the fire piece goes to the big copper anode coil, and that's the one that's going to be depositing the copper onto your piece. Your piece needs to be suspended from something, and I use a glass rod with a small copper wire that's going to be used for hanging your piece. This needs to be making contact with your piece so that when the current goes through it, by attaching to it, everything just goes into one full circle. Now, when you put your piece in, you just drop it in, but you clip it like so, and then you drop your piece into the bath. You want to make sure that your piece is not touching any of the sides, specifically the copper anode, because then it's going to short circuit. Now, with your machine, I am using the Hematech. There's many varieties you can use, but this is the one that I chose. When you have all your pieces done, and I'm just not going to have anything in there, so I am going to detach it because I don't want anything to be flowing in there or passing any current or touching anything. So I'm just putting it down where it's not touching anything, and I'm going to make sure that they're not touching each other because, again, it's going to short circuit. So you're going to turn your machine on. When it clicks on, the pieces that you're going to be looking for is this piece and that piece. Depending on how big your piece is, you want to make sure that that is the correct setting. And then you use your knobs for your voltage and then your current. For your current, you want to press the buttons depending on which placing you are trying to modify. So if my piece were smaller, I will put it to like a 3 on the third setting. For the piece that I was working with earlier, because it was a larger piece, I went ahead and did it to 5. For my voltage, I set it up to 80. And then it regulates as it goes depending on how much it needs. Once you're ready and you know this is the settings that you want, you turn it on by pressing the button, and then it starts circulating and regulating your piece. This is what this piece does. Now, once you want to check your piece every time you put anything in the bath, you want to check it every 30 minutes and kind of like wiggle it, but make sure this is off. So you grab it, take it out, wiggle it, make sure that the small copper wire that is attaching to your piece doesn't get permanently fixed, because that's how your copper is flowing through. And then make sure that everything's okay. If it's not, you need to take it out, patch it up with the dark black copper paint or whatever it is that you're using to conduct the copper. That's pretty much it. So my setting has the Hematech HM305, and this is what it looks like. It's also listed in my Amazon affiliates links on my website. And then my copper bath is not very pretty, and it's also not very sophisticated or big, but it works for what I need. And basically my anode needs to be trimmed and clean, and then I replace this piece every so often, because that's just a piece that gets, as you can see, a lot of the copper has already been deposited there and or starts burning off. So you replace that every once so often. After a couple hours and over the course of a few sessions, depending on how big your piece is, you will take it out and it will look a nice copper color. Depending on the look you're trying to get, you may need to leave it in for longer, up the voltage, or lower it. Dip my piece into a neutralizing solution. This is baking soda and water, and basically stops the chemical processing, and it makes it safe for handling. After this, I then rinse it in a little bit of water, and just, gives me a peace of mind that when I'm going to hold it, it's not going to hurt me. The sanding phase is the least favorite part, but is the one you need to sort of show you what the actual true color of copper is. Initially, I like to use different levels of grit, and I go over it once just to get all the top layer level of copper and display the rich, beautiful pink copper. And I remove the latex so that I can see what it looks overall. Leaving the liquid latex up to this point just gives your pieces some extra protection. You can remove it before or after you've done your polishing. This is Black Max, and I love working with this compound as opposed to liver of sulfur, which it takes a little longer to oxidize and gives me a little more precision. I added to the places that I kind of want to give it more depth, and then I put it into the neutralizing solution, dry it up, and then polish it. I can leave it black, but I do like just that darkened, antiqued look that I am trying to achieve here. I do recommend that you play around with the type of finishes you want to achieve, but this is what I like. And the oxidation can be permanent, but every time you polish it, it brings back the copper. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and if you have any questions or need any more detailed explanations, please do let me know in the comments. I am more than happy to do so for you. Thanks so much for watching.